A gute Woche. The Rebbe since began to Farbrengen this afternoon that this Shabbos is called Shabbos Nachamu. First Shabbos which comes after Tisha B'Av, and it brings out the expression of condolence from the Rebbe to Yid. Right away we see the expression in the Haftarah which we said today is Nachamu Nachamu Ami, a double expression. And as the Rebbe right away went into it, referring to the expression Kiflayim L'Toshiyah, a double Nechama. And being that this is the first of the 7 weeks of Nechama, this is the Rosh, the head of the weeks of Nechama, so we must say that this concept of Nechama B'Kiflayim is something which applies not only to the first week. This concept applies that the entire 7 weeks of Nechama, the Rebbe is giving Yidden a Nechama B'Kiflayim. It's just that it is expressed in the first of the weeks, which is the Rosh of the weeks, the head. Just like a head gives life into the entire body. The same thing, this is the head of the Shiva, the Nechemt of the 7 Shabbosim. When in each of the 7 Shabbosim, the Haftarah is such of Nechama, a condolence from the Rebbe to Yidden after the Churban Habayis, after the period of Bein HaMetzarim. And right away we are told that what type of a Nechama is it? It is a Nechama B'Kiflayim. We should know that the Rebbe's expression to Yidden is a double expression. The Mele, the Avoide, mitzad Yidden to the Rebbe in this time, also is required to be such an Avoide with an emphasis on Kiflayim L'Toshiyah. In other words, the Avodah has to be with an extra emphasis to try and accomplish a double Avodah, so that we should be Kalim to the Nachamu of the Rebbe. And here the Rebbe stressed it throughout today's Farbrengen, and the Rebbe stressed it at many occasions, that when we're talking of the entire concept of Churban, the Rebbe destroying the Beis HaMikdash, is so that after the Churban, we will reach to a yet higher madrege than we were when we had the second Beis HaMikdash. And that is really the entire intention of the Churban, is such so that ultimately Yidden will reach to a yet higher madrege. The Rebbe keeps on referring to a medrash, where the medrash discusses that Bo Ariel, Nebuchadnezzar was referred to Ariel, and he, the Hichriv, and he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Almenas, why was this? And Medrash says the word almenas meaning on the condition, because of, so that later, afterwards, we will have that the Rebbe who is called Aryeh will come and give us back the Beis HaMikdash at a yet higher level. So that's the entire union of Churban. And especially today is Yud Aleph. What is the Inyan of Yud Aleph? 11 days in the month of Av. 11 days in the month of Av, that's the Inyan of the Vav K of Shem Havai. Rebbe's name has 4 letters. Vav K is equivalent to 11. And that's today's day. And this is the stress that today we are beginning a period where the Rebbe from his side is giving an Inyan of Kiflayim L'Toshiyah, and Yidden from their side as well. This is a time where the Rebbe, where we have to give Avodah in a way of Kiflayim L'Toshiyah. And here the Rebbe explains that the great koiches which Yidden have, that the Rebbe gives Yidden such koiches, that a Yid with one thought in his mind can accomplish the entire Avodah Satshuvah. When a Yid brings out within himself a hero tshuva, an expression of tshuva, his tshuva is accepted. And not only is it accepted, but somebody who was at a level of a Rosh Gomo previously can reach now to become to a level of a Tzaddik Gomo. What's the meaning of a Tzaddik Gomo? Simple taich of it means that he's a complete Tzaddik. Today's Farbrengen, the Rebbe taich a deeper taich. Gomo is Maloshin Mugma. Mugma, Maloshin HaKodesh, means something which we smell, perfume, something which has a good scent, is called Mugma. Gemara and a Mishnah. What do we say? That a person has this koyach that with a thought of tshuva, Yehuri tshuva, can lead him that he can become a tzaddik gomur. Not stammet tzaddik, but a complete tzaddik to the extent that he has a good and proper odor, a good and proper smell. We're talking on ruchnius. The Rebbe brings the Gemara. The Gemara says that the reach, scent, is something which not only does the guf enjoy it, reach is something shaneshama nena mimenu. The neshama also enjoys a good scent, a good odor. Here we are talking in ruchnius, that when a person does tshuva, tshuva can have such an effect, can uplift him so that he can reach to the level of a tzaddik gomer, and gomer in the sense, malashim mugma, that he's so whole and complete that he has a proper scent, a proper odor. Comes with a very and a pleasant one, actually, a very desirable one. And here we come to this week's Chazarah. Before getting into the Chazarah, Rebbe mentions also that we're going, for those that learn 3 prokim of Rambam a day, there's a siyum. We're saying now the halachas of kelim, which discuss the halachas of tumah regarding vessels, regarding kelim, and we begin the halachas of mikveh, the halach of purity through a mikveh. Mentioning this, the Rebbe says that the Rambam in his sefer really encompasses the entire cycle of the world. The Rambam begins, what are the opening words of the Rambam? Yesoida Yesoidos, V'amud HaChochmos, to know that there's the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is something which relates to the creation of the world. Why does the Rambam finish his sefer with? The Rambam finishes his sefer describing what the world will be like when Mashiach will come. So in other words, the Rambam in this sefer really encompasses the entire world from day one of its existence, from the Sheshes Yimei Bereishis, how we have to realize that everything was created through HaKadosh Baruch Hu, until the final stage, what will happen when Mashiach will come. And the same things as the Rebbe we really have in the Sedras, which we are into now. Sedra begins with Vaeschanan, and as already mentioned last week, that Vaeschanan equals Tov Kuf Tes Vav 515. And as the Rebbe explained last week, what's the Indian of 500? 500, as explained in Chassidus, is something which relates to Seder Ishtalshelus, the Indian of the world. What Shaykhus does it have to 500? There's a Gemara. The Gemara says, Me'ah Oretz L'Rikiyah, from Oretz, from earth to heaven, Mahalich Tak Shona, takes 500 years to walk it. Distance. It's explained what it means, but what we need for our opinion is that when we're talking about earth and heaven, the concept of the world, the number of 500 is a number that's relevant to that. What is the Indian of Tesvav? Tesvav is Yudke, that's the Rebish's name. So what does this Sedra tell us? The Sedra right away tells us how the Avodah of a Yid is to bring together 515. In other words, to take the Indian of Seder Ishtalshel is the world, and that the world should become imbued, permeated with the concept of Tesvav, with the concept of Shem Hashem, of Yudke. That's the beginning of the Sedra. What do we have at the end of the Sedra? What does the Sedra finish with? Sedra finishes with the words Hayoim La'asoisam, that we have to know, today we have to do. Heint, Dafman Ton, in other words, not to postpone, that it's time to do, La'asoisam, to do the Torah mitzvahs, the fulfillment of the wish of HaKadosh Baruch. What do we go into the Sedra, which we began reading by Mincha? We go into Parshas Eikev. What is Parshas Eikev? Begins V'hoya Eikev Tishmon. So there are several types in the word of Eikev. One type is that Eikev means the heel of a person. Just Moshna Akvayim. What do we mean in Ruchnius? A heel. A heel means all the way at the end, all the way on the bottom. In other words, we're talking about Avodas Hashem from Hayoim La'asoisam until the rewards which will take place and everything which will take place all the way towards the Eikev Tishmon and the Eikev. However, this also brings out that this Hayoim La'asoisam is Farbrengen, is tied in with the beginning of which Hayem La'asoisim are the closing words of Pashas Vaeschanan. This is tied in with the beginning of the Hoya Ekev Tishmon, which comes, the Hoya, it comes as a continuation, Vav. It comes as a continuation that when we will listen and follow the desire, the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the Rebbeinu will reward us with Shomar Avaya Lekecha Lecho Es HaBris, Ves HaChesed, Ves HaShvua, and as the Rebbe put emphasis that all these things are stressing on the relation of the Maila Metam B'das, above the realm of any type of limitation, or above the realm of understanding the inner relationship which exists between the Rebbeinu and Yidden. And this is all based on the fact how each and every Yid goes back to Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, because each and every Yid is a descendant of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, a descendant of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, V'Leah, and to such an extent that even in davening, how do we begin our davening? Elokeinu v'Elokei Aviseinu. First we say Elokeinu, because a Yid has to tie himself together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's first. Once a Yid has tied himself together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and made himself a vessel to be verbunden, to be tied in together with the Eibishter, then we stress right away what are the merits that we have. Elokei Avraham, Elokei Aviseinu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. And this is reflected in the Chazarah as well. That the reward which the Rebbeinu gives, B'Shomar Hashem Elokecha Lecho Es HaBris, Ves HaChesed, Ves HaShvua, Asher Nishba L'Avisecha, that the Rebbeinu has given an oath to our others, to Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, that he will relate to us. Furthermore, V'Hoya. This is how Ekev begins. V'Hoya Ekev Tishmon. V'Hoya, says the Rebbe, Chazal tell us that V'Hoya is an expression of happiness, an expression of simcha. Vayehi, it was. Vayehi b'mei Achashverosh. Vayehi is a lashon of tzar, lashon, an undesirable happening. However, when the expression of V'Hoya is used, V'Hoya is a lashon simcha. What is V'Hoya? V'Hoya stresses, if we were to take the letters of V'Hoya, we have the letters of the Rebbeishter's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, but in a different order. It's explained in Chassidus. Vav Kei refers V'Hoya. Vav starts with Vav and a Kei. Then we have the Yud Kei, but it starts with Vav Kei. Vav Kei is explained in Chassidus, relates to Torah mitzvahs. What does Yud Kei relate to? Yud Kei, Chassidus explains, relates to Moichen, to his beinunus. In other words, there's the practical fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. Then there is where Yid puts his mind really in depth into the in-depth in Yonim that are behind all that. The Vav and the Kei are much easier accessible than the Yud Kei, the way we're explaining it. In other words, it's much easier to fulfill Torah mitzvahs in the simple sense of being Mekayim Torah mitzvahs, and it is harder to reach to the level of Yud Kei, which just brings out the inyan of Moichin, how he takes his machshavah, his moichin, which is chokhmah, bina, and das, and dedicates that to Getlachkeit. And not at all times a person can have his Yud-Kei as active as the Vav-Kei. Vav-Kei is much easier. Why? Very simple, because Vav-Kei is something practical, to do, the Maaseh, the Asiyah. Yud-Kei is already the Chokhmah Bina Das, the in-depth thought which we can give. The Rebbe compared it, just as a parallel that we understand it. The Rebbe said that the Rambam writes that the rewards which the Torah gives us, the schar which is discussed in Torah, that's really not a reward which we will get for fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. The reward is a much greater one. And the reward we will have in Olam Haba. What are all these Gashmistic rewards of the Nisati Gishmeich and Bita, and we will be blessed with an abundance of Gashmis and all that. So the Rambam explains that all this is so that a Yid should be able, in order that a Yid should be able to serve to HaKadosh Baruch Hu properly, the Torah felt that a Yid has to be comfortable. When a Yid is comfortable and has all his material needs, then it is much easier for him to set himself into such a setting to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is the taich, that's what the Rambam explains, that's the taich of all these Gashmistic rewards. The Mela says the Rebbe, what do we see? We see that not at all times a Yid could be in the proper mood if he's lacking certain Gashmistic inyanim. It's hard for him to be dedicated to the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The same, with this light, the Rebbe is explaining the same idea, that the Yud K is harder to fulfill than the Vav K. Vav K is the simple commitment of mitzvahs. That's much easier. However, to dedicate a Chochmah Bina Udas, which is what the union of Yud K stands for, that is hard. So that's why it goes in such an order. However, when a Yid fulfills it, then when the Vahoya is complete, Side Avodah from Vav K and Side Avodah of Yud K, this is a Vahoya Elalosh Simcha. This brings out a Simcha by HaKadosh Baruch Hu when Yidden do the Avodah in the completeness of Side Vav K and Side Yud K. Here the Rebbe comes back to another inyan in this week's Seder. This week's Seder we learn about Orei Miklot. Orei Miklot, cities of refuge. If somebody would kill someone unintentionally, then the Torah tells us that there were 6 cities. These cities, that is where the one who was accused of killing would run away to. And anybody that would want to take revenge, be a goyel hadam, as the Torah uses the expression, for the person whom he killed, once the suspected killer reached the city of refuge, then nobody was allowed to touch him. He was kind of like a safe territory. The Gemara brings out the same inyan in Ruchnius. And the Gemara applies to it the expression, Divrei Torah koiltin. Words of Torah is also like a city of refuge. In other words, when a person is involved in learning Torah, he's also in a safe place. What's made this? So Rebbe brought out today, we say, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol levavcha, with all your heart. What's the touch with all your heart? B'shnei yitzarecha. There are 2 yitzers in the person. There's the yitzer toiv, and there's the yitzer hara. The ultimate goal is that the yitzer hara should also be converted, that he too should serve the Rebbe. However, in the meantime, the yitzer hara is somebody who is like the goyel hadam. He's trying to kill us. He's trying to stop us from fulfilling mitzvahs. He's after the person. He is after the person. So what are we told? We're told that if the person gets himself into an Ir Miklot, into a city of refuge, into the words of Torah, into the learning of Torah, Torah is a protection. Torah saves the person spiritually from the Yetzer Hara who is after him and trying to get him. The Rebbe says there's an interesting thing that the Gemara tells us. The Gemara tells us that when a person would go to the Ir Miklot, he would walk on the highway, on the road which was leading to the Ir Miklot, and each time he came to a fork in the road, there would be a sign. And the sign would say, Miklot, Miklot. The Rebbe says not once, but twice. Again, a double emphasis. What does it mean in Avodah? In Avodah, many of us, now in day-to-day life, we also come to a fork in the road. We do not know how to continue. So we have to know that when we're out on the road, there is a big sign at that fork. And that big sign stresses, Miklot, Miklot. Gives us directions to go to the city of refuge. And what is the city of refuge? The city of refuge is Torah. And it's a double miklot. A person always has to know that it's a miklot for himself as well as a miklot for others. He has to protect his own self, and together with it, he has to see and involve reach out to other Yidden, and bring closer other Yidden also to Torah, until ultimately the other Yid as well will also become a neir lehoyer, a light that will, a licht that will shine, will illuminate not only for itself, but will bring lichtigkeit to other Yidden as well. And this is the message of this week's Seder, how divrei Torah koiltin, we have to know we're aiming towards cities of refuge, and we're on the road, and there are forks on the road, and we don't know how to continue. So we should know that when we come to a road and we are in a folk and we don't know which direction to go, there's a sign there. And the sign there is telling us miklot, miklot, directing us to Torah. And the Rebbe goes back to the concept of Nachamu. Concept of Nachamu is not stressed in a singular expression. Nachamu, plural. In other words, we are talking not only to one Yid. Whenever a Yid is stressing the concept of the Nechama, of the Koiches which we are getting from the Rebishter, the condolence which the Rebishter is giving us, the strength which the Rebishter is giving us to hold out in Golas, we have to stress right away that we're not only talking to one Yid, we are talking to another Yid and to another Yid. The goal of it is to reach out to as many Yidden as possible. Nachamu, plural. And here the Rebbe goes into this week's Chazarah. Chazarah begins with Vaeschanan, and Rashi touches up what is the meaning of Vaeschanan. Right at the beginning of the Chazarah, so Rashi brings two taijim. Rashi brings two interpretations. One interpretation is that Chanun is from the word the matnas chinam, that's a free gift, a giveaway. And another taich that Rashi brings, Davaracha, that this is one of the expressions for tefillah. The word tefillah can also be brought out through Vaeschanan. So the Rebbe asked a simple question. First, what Rashi should say is the expression, this is an expression of tefillah. This is a perush which is closer to pshat. As the Rebbe used to explain Rashi's in more detail. The Rebbe would always bring out how Rashi's emphasis is primarily on pshat. So if Rashi wants to explain what is the taich of Vaeschanan, first let Rashi say that Vaeschanan is an expression of tefillah. Then Rashi could continue and say also that Vaeschanan has another taich. It means a lashon chinun, a lashon of a free gift. So the Rebbe brought out how we see even by children, the attitude of a child is a child asks for things. Child asks. This is the nature that children have. They ask from adults. They want things. When they want things, what do they want it? What are they requesting it as? They're requesting it as a matnas chinam, as a free gift, without not the taich that it's coming for a compensation for something. Child is requesting. A child tries to get. The Rebbe was bringing out our children, the way children are brought up. They're brought up in an environment where a child sees tzitzis and a girl sees Shabbos licht and the child sees tefillin. So Mamela, from itself, a child has an inner strive to reach out to all these things, until at times it even comes when we have to hold back children from getting close to it, because sometimes we don't want it, that child may not treat it properly or so. But what do we see? A child from zich alein, from his own self, has an inner strive to get close to all these things. And this is the concept of the inyan of a matnas chinam. Free gift, a handout. And this is how a child even sees that he gets things that way from adults. Mamela, the same way Moshe Rabbeinu felt by asking from the Rebishter. It's something which is so common and so commonly practiced in the inyan of a matnas chinam. So Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to approach it the same way. That's the first taich in it. And Rashi also tells us you should know that Vaeschanan is also Maloshen Tefillah. It was here in this Sikha that the Rebbe got into a lengthy explanation about the inyan of Rabbeinu Tam's Tefillah. Rebbe said that there are some communities where Rabbeinu Tam's Tefillah are not put on at the same time together with Rashi's Tefillah. And that is because Rabbeinu Tam's Tefillah they feel require a holy body and a holy mind and a holy machshavas and holy thoughts, and therefore there are many communities where it is an accepted custom that Rabbeinu Tam's film is not put on until even after the wedding, after one's wedding, because that is when a person becomes more settled with a cleaner mind, and so forth. However, in Chabad, the Rebbe says it is customary that Rabbeinu Tam's film are put on at an early age. In fact, once a child begins putting on Rabbeinu Rashi's film with a bracha, that is from Bar Mitzvah, Rashi's film the child puts on even before Bar Mitzvah. Approximately 2 months before Bar Mitzvah, there's like a training period to put on Rashi's film. But Rabbeinu Tam's film, once a child starts putting on film with a bracha, and Chabad it is the minig that is when Rabbeinu Tam's film are begun to put on. In fact, it was in the first Sikha the Rebbe was discussing how a Yid can accomplish tremendous things with his gashmias, with his money, and even all mitzvahs we acquire through money. For example, how do we get muhudadik film, real good film? We also get it by spending more money on it. That's how we get yet better film. So the Rebbe was talking, the first Sikha the Rebbe mentioned Rashi's film, as well as Rabbeinu Tam's film, as well as there are two other sets of film. There's Shimusha Rabbit film and Raivet film. These film they're not popular. Very few people put them on. It's an accepted fact. I mean, by Chassidim they say that the Rebbe puts on 4 pairs of tefillin. In fact, he was instructed so by the Friedrich Rebbe yet to put on, besides Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, these additional pairs of tefillin, Shemusha Rabba and Raivet. And it's also known that very few individuals that put on these 2 additional pairs of tefillin. But it's interesting that in today's Sikha, Rebbe mentioned how Yid can acquire mitzvahs and Hidur mitzvah, and it all can be acquired, and listed all various pairs of tefillin. Let's go back. Regarding the theme of Rambam, Rebbe also mentioned the inyan of Kalim. What's the inyan of Sefer, the halachas of Kalim, which we learn. Halachas of Kalim bring out how everything in this world can be a keli, can be a vessel for godliness. And from the halachas of Kalim, we enter into the halachas of mikvahs. And mikvahs, that's the highest level of purity. Mikvah brings purity, brings tahara. So again, it's very high in Yonim, these in Yonim and the Rambam. Now, Avodas Hashem, these halachas are with a very deep significance in, how everything in this world can be utilized as a keli, as a vessel for godliness, and as well as the entire concept of mikveh. Ma mikveh metaheres es atmeim af HaKadosh Baruch Hu metaheres Yisrael. The famous Chazal, just like mikveh brings tahara to those who are tamei, the same thing that Rebishter brings purity to all of Klal Yisrael. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe continued, spoke very warmly that there are guests here that came for this Shabbos to participate here at the Farbrengen. B'chlal, we know that Chazal tell us the greatness of guests to such an extent that G'doila hachnosas oichem yoisa mekabalas pnei hashchina, that greeting guests is yet greater than greeting the Shechina. The Chazal derived this, that when Avraham Avinu was in the middle of a conversation with the Rebishter, after Avraham had circumcised himself, and all of a sudden he saw the Malachim, who seemed to him as guests, he dropped the conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and went to turn to the Malachim and provide their needs. So the Gemara explains on this, that greeting guests is yet greater than greeting the Rebishter. So it's a tremendous, great schus that we have guests, and we have to honor these guests by asking them to say l'chaim. And these guests bring simcha already to all of us. So not only they will say l'chaim, all of us will say l'chaim, and they'll be saying l'chaim, everybody will say l'chaim, l'chaim will have bracha for himself and for his entire family. But they very strongly emphasize the great simcha that we have when we have this occasion to greet guests, and especially guests that have chosen to come on a day of Shabbos. Shabbos is such a special day, and they have chosen to come to such a special place of The Rebbe refers to the Rebbe's Medrash of 770. This is the place where the Frierdiker Rebbe has spent the last 10 years of his life, and this is a house of Torah, a house of Tefillah, a house of Tzedakah. The guests that have chosen to come to such a significant place, and definitely we have to honor them by giving them to say L'chaim, as well as each and every one of us to say L'chaim. Then the Rebbe added on that it's only proper that when something is demanded from other people, that the one who demands it should do so himself as well. Therefore the Rebbe said it, Ani hakotin, on himself. It's an expression that means, the Rebbe is bringing out, I, Ani, myself, hakotin, the small one. It's an expression which is used. The Rebbe says, I will also participate by myself also saying L'chaim, and the Rebbe also said L'chaim as well to everybody.